Hey everybody, this is Goat and a Fox Talk About Movies. We're back with another episode. I'm Daniel Goldhorn,
And I'm Reynard.
and today we are going to be talking about Ari Aster's new movie for May 24, Beau Is Afraid. And I, so we've each seen this movie at slightly different points. Reynard saw this last week, a few days ago, so he's had time to put his thoughts in order. I just got home from seeing it. We are actually recording this about like half an hour after we usually do these recordings because, I had to catch a screening that went that late. So I'm still processing everything, and there's a lot to process in this movie.
Still reeling.
It's still reeling, exactly. But we'll kind of start with like our broad overview. Reynard, what did you think of Beau Is Afraid?
Well, it's certainly a lot. I think it was, I went into it with fairly blind, or what I'd seen a trailer or something, and so I didn't really know what I was going to get, and oh boy, did I get everything. I was pleasantly surprised by how funny it was. I know that Ari Aster has shown that he's got comedic chops, especially in like Midsommar, but like to have it like be thoroughly in that world was fun for me. And I mean, I guess fun and this movie aren't necessarily the most positive, or not positive, but the most, accurate descriptors, but it's certainly a ride.
Yeah, I really loved it myself. Because Hereditary, thought that was really great. Back all the way back in 2018. God, that feels like forever ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And then that very next year in 2019, we got Midsommar, which was probably one of the most gruesome movies I've ever seen in my life, but also very good. And we finally got a new movie with this one. And I think this might just be the recency bias, but I feel like this might be my favorite movie of his so far. You can really see a lot of ambition. You see, there's this segment of like 20 minute long segment in the movie that's just like animated. And, that was a very kind of surreal thing to see. Now that added a really great element there that I think was, a lot of fun. Obviously, the length, the runtime, 3 hours. It's very difficult to kind of keep that under control, but I feel like it did that relatively well. There's like a couple points, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think he did that pretty well. And I don't know, just you can see that, this feels, that again, this is taking a slightly different track from what he did before. This isn't so much as outright horror as it is like kind of this surreal, off-putting kind of sense. Like you had compared it to, I'm thinking of Ending Things from a couple years ago. I think that's a very good comparison. Like a David Lynch kind of a feel to it. And yeah, like
yeah, I think it's more it's definitely more in the camp of like a Kaufman film or like Mulholland Drive or that, and we can kind of get into these as they kind of come up. Different directors had different kind of tacks with this sort of surrealist, metaphorical, if you will, storytelling. And yeah, I'm trying to I always have to let it kind of digest. It's so different to his other films that I have a hard time making a head-to-head comparison. I think if you look beneath this, like the surface of it, are certainly thematic ideas that he's kind of returning to or exploring in a slightly different way. There are a couple of things that he's clearly very interested in or hung up on or something. Like you're saying, it's a very well realized and creative world. I think it's a testament to his thoroughness in that regard. But I also do think it kind of, and partially with the length and everything, does kind of show some cracks in the facade of it. the other two films are much more fable-like, and you do get a fable in the animated sequence, but it's a lot kind of more, those are more of a fairy tale in a way, whereas this is a lot more like dense in the storytelling it's trying to do. I think you do see some interesting choices being made there.
Yeah, it's like, and definitely like it feels like, it's very much a movie that feels like it's being made by a sure hand. Like, you can tell that he understands the craft, he understands everything. And even if there's a choice where like, oh, I don't know if I liked how that went, I can just be like, okay, I can see how it would fit into the overall vision. This doesn't feel like a mess or anything like that. And
it was well structured and stuff. It just starts to feel like a lot at points. We're early on and whatnot. I remember reading when this was first, when it was Disappointment Boulevard and all that kind of thing. Like, there was like news of it being like a 4-hour cut, and I don't think I want to see that. I saw the Midsommar like director's cut that was released like a year or so later, and that was fine. There was one scene that was added that I felt added to it, but I think the rest of it was fun to look, or nice to look at, but it didn't really augment it. So I do think that he benefits from being edited down. I would have edited this down a bit further myself, but I also believe that no movie should be 3 hours long without my personal clearance, and I just haven't gotten that through to Hollywood yet. But yeah.
There's like, cause overall, like I wouldn't say like there's a point where like I fully checked out of the film, but there was a couple points where I kind of looked. I was like, okay, where are we at? Oh, there's an hour and a half left. Where are we at? Oh, there's about 30 minutes left.
Yeah, it's engaging, but it's a lot. I think we're gonna say it's a lot.
Yeah, there's like a couple points you kind of start to feel the length, and then like it'll pick up again, and then you're like, oh, that's really good. But it's like I feel like a little bit of trimming. Now one thing I do want to clarify is that because we're talking like, oh, like this isn't like, it's different from his other movies. It's like it's funnier. I want to emphasize that this is still very much it feels like a nightmare still. Like less and I just want to bring this up because when I was walking out of the theater, I saw the poster for the movie, and for the first time I read the tagline of it. And so the tagline of this movie is, "From his darkest fears comes the greatest adventure."
It's so whimsical.
It's so whimsical. It's the biggest load of shite I've ever seen. He's going on the greatest adventure. Yeah, to hell.
Maybe not great for him.
I can see why he is afraid. Yeah, so that's so we'll start to dig in. There's really no way to talk about this movie without like getting into finer details. Like if you want to avoid spoilers, I think you can kind of get a general idea. Like, we both really like the movie. You like Ari Aster, the other stuff. You'll probably like this one. It's a little different, but it's still very much in his style.
Yeah, it's like one of those ones where I enjoy it personally. I can't recommend it to everyone, but I think if you have responded to his other stuff, I think this will work for you.
Yeah, it's like, definitely this isn't one where it's like, next time someone's like, hey, what is, do you have any movies to recommend? To be like, okay, do you feel like spending 3 hours being very uncomfortable? If so, I got the title for you. But yeah, so let's jump in. So, like right from the opening of the movie, like it opens with, there's a couple of interesting sequences. So it starts with like Beau being born, and like, it's like this point of view shot where like he comes out, and it's all bleary. You hear like, like the water of the womb, and then when he comes out, it's all muffled, and they're like, oh, he's not crying, why isn't he crying? His mother's like, oh, why isn't he crying properly? And then it cuts to like years later, he's at a therapist, and he's talking about like, you kind of tell he's having some trouble with like his relationship with his mother. And then he goes outside, and the world is just, this is the thing that I did remember from the trailer the most, is just how this world is so over the top and wacky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely very. It looks like, I don't know, unused B-roll from some Como News Seattle is Dying feature. There's like tweakers everywhere and people with AK-47s just next to people selling knickknacks, and everyone's screaming and shooting each other and just running around like crazy people. It's great.
I would say they really managed to tone down what it's like in New York City. But yeah, so it's, and what I like about it is it's not like over the top, super wacky. Like, I guess the way I described it isn't super accurate, but it does feel a bit like, almost like Uncanny Valley, where like, you know, I see people walking around, and like, if you saw like a still of this movie, you might not be like, you might be like, oh, okay, that doesn't seem like too out of the way, but it's just like the way things are doing, like what people are doing in the streets, and just to get this idea, like, okay, like this doesn't feel right.
It felt to me like it was like the suburbanites like conception of like the dangerous big city, which feeds very much into Beau's sort of eternal paranoia. Like, he's constantly in danger. If he goes out of his apartment, he will get stabbed. If he's in his apartment, he will get attacked by a brown recluse spider. Like, there's this oppressive sound design. Even when he's inside, there's people screaming and you can hear all the sirens from the outdoors. It just kind of like lays this like bedrock layer of paranoia and fear and just a sense of unsafeness for me.
Yeah, it's like, oh shoot, hold on a second. Give me just a second, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's Beau's mom. She knows you're talking shit. We're gonna be talking shit. Just gonna put a stop to
that. Speaking of Beau's mom, when you were talking, that actually made me realize something.
Mm-hmm.
Beau's like view of the city, like the way he perceives it, it's her perspective on the city.
Exactly.
She's like, it's his. See, these are things that are going to start clicking into place for me as we talk about this now. Mm-hmm. It's her like paranoid view of everything, and we can see how it kind of like infiltrates into how he acts. I have to say, like, it actually makes for a lot of really good jokes. Like, I love the there's this one where he takes some pills, and they say like, oh, you have to take them with water. And he immediately Googles like, oh my god, I don't have any water. The water in the building isn't working. And he Googles like, oh, what are the side effects of taking these pills with no water? And like the first results are like all stuff like, oh, you're going to die. And then like one of the top results is remembering John. He took Benadryxapoxyline without water and died.
It's just that first act, him in the big city, it's just like, how can his day just comprehensively go wrong? There he's at the water is suddenly shut off. He's short on cash in the convenience store, and watching like all the crazies just file into his apartment building, and
just like them slowly going in there. It's like,
like, here we go. His like house party, and like this is where like Ari Aster's like really intricate production design kind of comes up again. Like we saw this in like Midsommar. You have like when Florence Pugh carries in that apartment, you have all these things. You get these little like clues that are coming out, like maybe one of the guys is into like Nazi symbolism linked to like Nordic cultures or whatnot. And here you have just like all these little posters everywhere and all of these tiny details that are fun little Easter eggs, but also just build this really overwhelming world where everything is frightening and overwhelming, and the only thing that's safe is it's safe with massive scare quotes around it, is his mother figure, and kind of presented as well through the MW company, which there's nothing that sketches me out more than if their logo is like perfectly safe. I'm like, that just feels suspect.
Come to our restaurant. Our food is perfectly edible.
Like, oh, okay, and we'll be calling the public health authorities immediately.
Hi, yes, I want to report this company. They are saying that the stuff is perfectly safe. Hello? Hello? Yeah, it's just like, it's like that kind of thing where it's like an overbearing feeling. And also, like, we get that first conversation with his mother where, like, he calls, he's like, hey, this thing came up, with the trip. And let me tell you, like, talking about things that are carrying over from his other films, Ari Aster really knows how to write abusive relationships in a way that's very frighteningly real.
Yeah. And Joaquin Phoenix does such a good job of, like, kind of collapsing in on himself. Like, he's practically unintelligible at points because he's just so powerless in relation to his mom.
Yeah, it's just like, and that's like another thing I have to talk about, mention this movie. I don't know, this might be a hot take, but I think Joaquin Phoenix is a good actor.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna need to see some more evidence.
Yeah, he is so good, and that's because he's able to, and I noticed this, like, there's entire long extended shots that'll be nothing but just him listening to something on the phone, and you don't even realize that it's going on for so long because his face is able to very precisely change along with his emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's, and he's able to do things like, because sometimes this movie would go from like something horrifying to something comedic, or like back again, like very quickly. And I think that it would have felt more jarring if he wasn't able to carry that performance.
Yeah, he's this kind of constant through the whole thing.
Yeah. He just, like he is, I don't even know how to say, how else do I say that he's good? How else am I supposed to say this? Thesaurus.com, answer for me.
There you go. Could have some synonyms. But yeah, that like initial conversation really kind of sets this like barometer where you're like, okay, yeah, there's something unhealthy between these two people.
Yeah, just like a way of him being like, hey, this thing happened, and being like, oh, like trying to make it subtly be like, oh, it's your fault. It's you, and yeah, it's like, oh, that hurts. Oh, that really. It's like, oh, you can see what's going on there. And like, so yeah, so that's, it's coming into play here. And then, yeah, like, so kind of moving forward, there's, Beau he runs into the street and he gets hit by a car. And that brings us into like the second main part of the movie, which is the surgeon's house. Surgeon played by Nathan Lane, and there's like, so it's, you have him, you have his wife and daughter, and they had the son who like died in a war, and they're very, like, they miss their son a lot, like to the point where they have not just like a picture of him on the wall along with like the folded flag and everything, but they have a puzzle made of his face.
There are multiple in his room. They're just like shrines to him, this departed hero. And the surgeon's just like dosing up everyone, just like popping pills like candy. And
don't mix them. Don't mix them.
Or at least take them with water, I guess.
Yeah. Take them with water or you will immediately die. By the way, real quickly, I have to also just mention that you were talking about the funny posters before. I have to say my favorite one was Jesus sees your abominations.
Yeah, I want that on my wall.
I want to put that outside Tom Hooper's house. How do I do that? But yeah, so Yeah, this whole thing with like the surgeon's place, and I felt so bad because like the surgeon is like trying to be like so nice. Like, hey, it's like the first time anybody has been nice to Beau in this movie, and it's been like an hour. I'm like, oh, thank God. But you know it's gonna get messed up, and it does, and it's like, why?
Yeah, I mean, like, he's very much like one of those kind of, with his Beau's mom being such the malignant narcissist. I saw the surgeon character as very much kind of one of like of her circle, that like one of the little like minions or whatever that kind of like helps to get, if Beau is in the process of escaping, he's there to kind of corral him back in and be like, let's get you back on the right track. So there's a certain like creepy hollowness to that whole dynamic.
One thing I did notice, like near the end of the movie when Beau reaches his mother's house, there's this picture of her that's made up of like all her employees, and then they assemble into like, this image of her, which is like, you know, has like several levels to it as well. But I noticed that Nathan Lane was part of that.
Right, because the mom like is Beau's world, and everyone that like he could ever possibly interact with is part of her as this like chimera entity that controls him from every regard.
Yeah, it's like, oh well, we'll get to that twist. We'll get to that whole twist. But yeah, it's so he stays with the family, and like the teenage daughter is like really upset that he's staying with them. At first, it's just kind of like, oh, she wants her room, but like you kind of see that she's been kind of overshadowed by not even so much Beau himself, but by, you know, her brother being gone. It's like her brother is the only person that her parents seem to care about, to the point where they put Beau in her room rather than the empty room that is no longer being used, but acts as a shrine for her dead brother.
Yeah. No, there's like crafting all these kind of resentments.
Yeah, and then she chugs paint.
You're just supposed to huff it, kid. God.
She huffed. I mean, technically, it's huffing paint if it goes down your windpipe too.
There you go. And then there's Jeeves, who's like both one of the funnier and one of the more terrifying characters in the whole situation.
Oh my God, yeah, it's just like Jeeves, tear him apart. I was like, oh my God.
Oh,
like,
no.
And he just like takes off. I was like, oh. And that was a really good mechanic, because that really kind of kept me tense for a good chunk of the movie. I was like, oh my God, this guy is coming. He's coming.
Yeah, you have this like constant kind of background threat, even on top of what at this point it's like he's motivated by like shame because the lawyer like told him that he's bringing shame to the family, and then just general guilt over his mother because she's dead apparently. Jeeves is gonna kill him. It's just like going real great for a guy.
I know. I was like, there's literally a point in my notes, I showed this to you, where I wrote down, "Let my man catch a break," in all caps. I will say another thing that I noticed about that part was his mother's last name is Wassermann, I think it is, like what, and the place she's in is Wasserton.
Yeah,
that's like the town she lives in, and I thought that was interesting to again conflate like this sense of ego, like well, maybe not so much ego, but like this personality around her, that she's so large in his mind that like she dominates like this entire town almost. It's like it's the place his mother is.
It's kind of very all-consuming.
So he runs away. So the surgeon's daughter chugs paint, and then he runs away into the woods, and he's picked up by this theater troupe, the Orphans of the Forest. Again, another one of my favorite lines, but where so he's injured, and like, you know, she's trying to treat him, and he goes like, you know, did it stop bleeding? And she replies, "It did. Trust me, my father bled to death." And
it's It's like
Like,
bone dry.
Yeah.
Well, I think right before he leaves, there's a small detail that kind of, A, is like another little asterism, and B, kind of, again, is just layering on just how controlling the mom is, because the surgeon's spouse tells him to look at it, watch a certain channel on the television, which is basically like some sort of like CCTV footage of the film. Essentially, he hits fast forward and it goes up almost to the very end of the movie, which kind of is like the start of Midsommar, where he just basically shows you the entire plot of the movie, and it's like, well, there you go. But then also, again, underlining that Beau really doesn't have a say in anything, that he's pretty much a passenger in his own life, and no matter what choices he makes, they're really not his own to make.
Yeah, it's so... God, just like the ending of this like really got me, because like, you know, Ari Aster does not like happy endings. I think that's pretty... I was like all this movie was like, oh, I want my, like, please, Ari Aster, just make this one movie. Make this the one where he gets away. Please.
Nice try.
I didn't manifest hard enough. That was my problem.
Like the secret it.
Yeah, I gotta focus and go like,
please never manifest anything again.
Oh my god. But yeah, like that's very much, and it's kind of tragic because when he gets to the theater troupe, he's so taken in by their play that he starts to imagine like he's like this life for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of see like what he wants deep down is something good. Like he wants to, you know, settle down, you know, learn a trade, have a family. It gets a little weird when the historic flood hits and he's doomed to wander the earth for decades and be blamed for a plague. But it's, I kind of took from that, like, you know, that was like a really interesting like illustration, like what Beau kind of like is like. And
yeah, that's the only glimpse inward that we kind of get to some extent.
And like I saw, it's like, oh, like he just wants. And again, like there's this moment where like he is like, quote unquote, like reunited with his sons, and it gets like real mind bendy because he wanders into another play as he's already imagining himself in a play, and the play is about his imaginary life, and the things that are happening in the play are being narrated and like as they happen, and then like it's
yeah, it's very kind of like a Ouroboros situation.
Yeah. And it was interesting because like he, you know, we see him as like this old man, like, you know, being like, oh, like he has like his sons again, and it's like this actually like really this mom was like, oh my god, like for a moment I really believed, I was like, oh, he's got his family, and then it's like, wait a minute, Dad, have you never had sex? How do we exist? It's just like boom, it's all gone.
No fun for you.
I know.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting segment of the film in terms of like how he kind of realized that it had a very sort of rich, like stop motion-y kind of energy to it, very like multimedia feel.
Oh my god. Yeah. Oh yeah, I should like, yeah, definitely clarify that the sequence talking about like or imagines his life is like, this is this moment where there's like so much animation and it looks so good. I mean, that's just like I like animation in general, so I'm like, yes, I'd love to see it. And yeah, like this is one of my favorite sequences in the whole movie. But then what was his name again? The attack dog guy.
Jeeves.
Jeeves comes in and just like destroys everything. he throws his throwing knife into like the theater troupe. Beau gets scared away. And he eventually like he hitchhikes. And he comes to his mom's house, and the funeral already happened. Actually, was there something? Let's see. Let me look here.
Oh God, it's all blending. He runs from the theater and gets like car checks. Oh my God. He hitchhikes. That's the term.
He does a car jack.
Yeah, he just becomes a criminal for a while. No, he like hitchhikes to Wasserton, and like when he gets to the home, they're packing up post service.
Yeah, it's like, and another one of my favorite jokes of the movie is like there's like all like these little like plaques like, oh, like, you know, in memory of, and then there's a little plaque where you see like a little divot on the floor. It's like, here fell the chandelier that had killed Morwell. And I was like, oh, that's good.
Gotta remember those little moments.
Yeah, there's those little things. And the theater I was in, like, it wasn't even like a super packed theater, but there was a lot of laughter at like a lot of these jokes.
Yeah, I was in a pretty like warmly receiving the audience.
I got more jokes than some studio comedies you see nowadays.
Ain't that the truth?
And then we get, so he finds like the love of his life, who he met when they were like 12, and then turns out that she's like, you know, she shows up for the funeral like hours late, and then they're still in love apparently, and then and there's like there's this thing going through the movie where it's like Beau has been trying to, like, you know, he's saying about like, oh, what happened to my dad and everything, and the story was always that his dad died conceiving him, because like the moment he climaxed, his heart exploded. And it's like, you know, it's like, oh, that's not quite like true or anything, but and so Beau is like terrified that that's going to happen to him. But then he and Elaine, they have very
normal sex.
Very normal sex. I'm sorry. Yeah. Very normal sex on his mother's bed, and he doesn't die, but she does. And again, I put here once again in all caps in my notes, holy shit, she fucking dead.
That's just like basically a scathing indictment of abstinence-only sex education. It was also a how-to manual for losing your virginity, turn on Mariah Carey, double wrap that, maybe, just for luck.
Oh my god. I will say, like, when like so it turns out like his mother like appears.
Yeah.
And she like faked her own death just to like mess with Beau to make a point. And a couple of like you know, like housekeepers, like they come in and just like carry the now rigid body out of the light away. I was like, oh my god.
That was one of the funniest things I saw in the entire film. It was phenomenal. And goddamn Patti fucking LuPone, like, for Mona, like, he brought in some real Broadway royalty for this guy. She was imperious.
Yeah, like, she is like, and again, just like, honestly, like thinking about it, I feel like her dialogue was like the least weird. Like,
no, she was the most like controlled and forthright person the whole thing, because she's kind of the ringleader running the show.
Yeah, like that was, you know, like and that's the thing is like in the rest of like in the city, kind of like, okay, things like a little silly here. It doesn't feel quite as like menacing, whereas like when she's on screen, you're like, oh my god, this is like, it's like, if an Ari Aster movie is taking you into circles upon circles of hell, you've just reached Satan herself in Beau's mom, and you're just like, oh my god, yeah. And she is so good, and again, just like the way that she uses like very controlling language, to the point where like, like if he tries to do something, it's like, it's these little things like, oh, like you tried to do a thing nice, and it's like, oh no, it secretly shows that you hate me and you don't appreciate me. And I think like the biggest twist for me was when it turns out that she had been colluding with Beau's therapist, and I was like, no, not you, not the priest from Lady Bird. I trusted you.
The Mentat guy.
The Mentat guy.
I forgot it was
the
in Lady
Mentats
Bird.
are full. Oh.
Yeah, it's just like, because she's like the scariest character in the whole thing, and it's just because it's played so simple and by the book, and it's just very kind of like universally condemning of everything that he does, and just building this like codependency through that.
God, yeah, it's just like, it's a very, I'll tell you what's like one of the scariest aspects of her. Okay, I mean, see the flashback to like him like meeting Elaine, and he's like, a little awkward, and it's like, oh, your first crush is always awkward, you don't know what to do. But then like his mom is like getting prying so much into it. I was like, oh, I don't like the way like this edge that's in there, where she's like, oh, do you have a certain kind of girl you like? It's like, I'm like, oh, she'd be lucky to have a man like you. Anyone would be lucky to have a man like you, which a mother should never say to her son ever, much less her 12-year-old son.
Just mommy issues. Speed run.
No. Oh, that was just... Oh.
Just very healthy, normal relationships through and through.
Oh, no. See, me like crying like that, that's how you know that this is a good Ari Aster movie.
Or tears of joy for sure. Or something.
You tell yourself that.
Okay.
Yeah, so, he keeps, he's still kind of hung up, like, oh, like, you want to know about, like, his dad, everything like that. And there's this, this memory that we see that, he always dismissed as a dream. That was, like, one thing where I think the movie was trying to put that as a twist where it's like, oh, it wasn't a dream, it was a memory. I don't know if that was just meant to be targeted at Beau himself, or that's meant to be like for the audience as well, where it's like, oh, it was a memory all along. But the second I saw it, I was like, oh, that's just probably a repressed memory. This is probably but so he sees like a version of himself who like stands up to his mother, who's like, oh, like, I want to know what happened to my dad. And then she like sends him to the attic and says like, now we will never talk about you again. But I have a theory. You might call it a film theory, perhaps.
Okay. Do tell.
So I was thinking, like, because I don't know if it would be, and this is kind of like a simple thing. I don't, if I rewatch it, I might be like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. But I was wondering if Beau had a brother, perhaps. Because in the funeral, he's specified as her sole surviving son. And she strikes me as a woman rich enough to make a child of hers that she doesn't like disappear. So
maybe. Is that really necessary though? Like, does that, what does that add to the story?
It would add that I saw something that makes me sound smart. And that's my theory. My film theory.
There we go.
Yeah, so like I guess it doesn't really add anything. I was just like, oh, maybe. I don't know.
It could be, or like maybe there was like a miscarriage or something that she kind of doesn't talk about, or something of that nature.
Yeah. Because really, I just have the one datum point, a single lonely datum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But enough about that. Let's talk about the penis stab.
Oh no.
So, she takes Beau to the attic, and she's like, "Fine, you want to see what's up here? I'll show you what's up there." And he goes up there, and we see.
Well, we see a large penis and engorged balls that has a face and little stabby arms.
Yeah. And then
that is a sight that I do not ever want to see again.
I'm sure there's probably some folks out there who see it and they're like, oh, they just discovered something about themselves.
Oh, I'm just gonna get a full back tattoo of that.
Oh no.
Please
no. I can just imagine someone getting a tattoo of them and being like, Ari Aster, look at this. And he would look at them and he'd say, why did you do this? What am I doing? And then, God, I keep forgetting his name.
Beau?
Glenn, I'm going to call him. Not Beau. Of course I remember Beau's name. Jeeves, thank you. I don't know why I keep forgetting that. But yeah, Jeeves smashes in through the window and like stabs the penis. And then the penis stabs him back. And at that point it's like, oh my god, what's happening?
Yeah. I have no words.
And then Beau like stumbles out of the attic. And he's getting like dragged back by like his therapist, and he's just like on the ground screaming and screaming and sobbing incoherently. And at that point, I was like, "This is how I'm gonna be taken out of the movie, isn't it?"
Just cut to black. Written, directed by Ari Aster.
Do
you think that was real?
The penis?
The penis dad.
I don't know. Like, that's the thing. It's kind of hard for me to be like, because through the movie I was kind of trying to be like, okay, what's like is like really happening here beneath his perception of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of odd because I don't really have that ready of an answer for a lot of it.
Yeah, sure.
Like, you know, I can believe that, like, in the city, the people who are, like, chasing him are maybe just, like, casually walking in his general direction. Or, you know, or maybe, like, I don't know, like...
Yeah.
But, like, waking up, like, in a surgeon's house, that's, like, a little... I'm not quite sure how to describe that, like, in a real life. Because I feel like surgeon would be like, oh, I will take you
take him to the hospital.
Yeah. You know, because modern medicine.
Yeah, you know what, we could probably, as we kind of get to the end and are sort of like looking at the thing as a whole, like, but I think for it to be real would be a bridge too far for me. It's just so out of the realm of everything else we've seen. Like, what we've seen has been weird as shit, but like not that. And so I don't know, it's just like one of the, like, it's kind of like sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and sometimes it's like a giant penis is just someone's like internalized sexual anxiety and father fear. So like, I don't know, I think it was just some weird interpretive chicanery.
I think it's just like he met his dad and his dad was just rude to him.
Right. He has no, like, all that he knows about his father is that he died having sex, and that builds and then is reinforced, like, his fear overcoming is basically all he knows about his father. And so that's what you would have to go off, is penis monster.
You missed my joke. Missed my joke.
It
His
flew
dad
right
was
over
being
my
rude
head.
to him. His dad was being rude to him. He's being a bit of a dick.
I hate you.
Oh,
This is too layered.
but anyways, and like, you know, like Beau comes like kind of like crawling back to his mom, and she just starts like laying into him and getting to the point she's like, oh, like, I hate you. I poured out everything for you, and you are not grateful for it in a way that I find satisfactory. And he just like he keeps his head bowed, and then he just like snaps and like chokes her.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit. She dies, and then he walks away from the house. And
Does he jump through the door, the slating glass door at that point? I feel like that is a bit that happens like a lot. Like, people don't merely walk through plate glass doors; they have to leap through them.
it went from like his mother like collapsing in on like a terrarium.
Oh, maybe that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And yeah, it's like she collapsed on the terrarium, and then like immediately cuts to him walking outside. So he probably broke through a glass door to get out there.
Probably, as one does.
And again, just like this great comedic moment where he's just like walking away from her house, like kind of across the screen, and his mouth is just hanging open, like this like horrified expression.
I didn't know that the human mouth could make that shape until I saw it on screen. It's deeply unsettling.
And again, like, this is like kind of what I was talking about, where like I feel like a lot of actors would struggle to kind of bridge that gap between this really heavy dramatic moment and then smash cut to a comedy shot, but just that mix of like genuine horror on his face with like the cut there, like that worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
just like absurdism, just kind of push like past the point where it's sincere to the point where it's just like, this is crazy shit going on and you have to watch it now.
yeah, this is like it's like those are great. And then he gets him taken to a boat and he starts like taking off, and then he's trapped in this arena, and basically the trial from Pink Floyd's The Wall starts playing. And kind of what I took away from this moment, so kind of how I interpreted it is that I think he really did like either like kill his mom or just like, or somehow like break free of her, like quote unquote. But what we see is like him internally still struggling with that.
Yeah,
and so
he's still completely overwhelmed. You know, like, she's there, her lawyer is the guy from earlier, and he's got his like megaphone and stuff, and the, I guess, defense attorney is like this little like dial-a guy who immediately gets killed. Yeah, so he's still completely, you know, bound to her.
I'm gonna add that onto like Ari Aster's like constants through his filmography. People getting thrown off of cliffs.
Just Autostupa, everyone. Smiling naked old people, Autostupa. Camera didn't turn upside down, I don't remember. We didn't get that.
Oh no.
Mommy
maybe
issues,
there's a
daddy
point.
issues.
Just such wonderful times with this director.
Yeah, this, I will say that the show trial was kind of where, for me, it started to feel a bit like a hat on a hat on a hat. Is like the central thesis statement of the film isn't fundamentally changed by this, and he's been exploring it throughout the entire movie, but he's kind of just reiterating again. It's his like concluding paragraph or something, which I don't know if I really needed to like kind of cement my understanding. Like it didn't introduce anything new to me. It in and of itself was an interesting scene, but after getting it presented to me in like 4 to 5 different ways, you know, through just kind of the textural supremacy of the mother by having her being omnipresent in like the production design and in the characters that are controlling him. And then again with this kind of more direct confrontation with the mom at the house, and then this was kind of, how many different ways do I need to be told the same thing? You know, I think different directors take different approaches to how do I take a core metaphor and like explore it, you know, like Kaufman does the like kind of, he builds his world kind of like we do with the Beau's experience in the city and stuff, and then is like using that to help explore this idea or these like psychic mindscapes or something, or you know, different approaches there. And then here it kind of started to feel like he was trying 8 different things. I mean, like, well, one of these will work for everyone or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, I definitely feel like, because it starts to introduce like new things, like new things that he did in his past, and no, like it might have been interesting to like maybe have those like alluded to earlier in the movie, or at least like, you know, or even like try to go through like stuff that had happened in the movie. So it did feel like it does feel a little strange, but at the same time, the ending of this whole sequence, I think, has this very interesting parallel with the opening. Mm-hmm. Where you know how I mentioned like, oh, like it opens like, you know, him coming out like the birth canal. It's like it's dark, like muffled, like screaming, things like that. And it ends with him finally crying, you know, like, you know, baby.
That's an interesting parallel, yeah.
And the same thing happens here, where he, the boat he's in, like slowly is like falling apart. He's stuck to it. And finally, like, he's condemned, and you kind of see, like, you know, at first he's begging, like, please, mom, just help me. And then he stops doing that. It's like he's realizing that there's nothing he can do to save himself. And then the whole thing, like, I don't know if like it flips over, like, or if like something like clamps up or like envelops him. But like, so he's pushed under the water, the credits start, and you just hear this, and it's similar to the beginning of the movie, where it's like, it's very muffled, there's like screaming and crying, and the audio design kind of mimicked that opening, and kind of gave me the sense of like this final horror where, you know, his mother gave him life, and at the end of the movie has unmade him.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach to that, kind of looking at it from a more textural angle. Yeah, kind of bringing that full circle.
Yeah, it was
it was a very succinct
yeah
summation of this fucking movie.
It's an experience, and honestly, that's kind of what I was looking for. I was like, okay, I want something that's gonna really just be like, holy shit, and just, oh, you know, he delivered, you know. It's yeah, and I do feel like, you know, with that ending, it is kind of, because I noticed that there was a lot of shots of like the audience around Beau, kind of like watching him looking on at him.
Yeah,
and I was trying to think like, oh, like, how does that kind of fit in with everything? You know, like, is that people like, kind of like how, like, you know, general public might like look on and not help because it might be like, oh, this isn't our thing, which is kind of like a common thread with a lot of abusive relationships.
Yeah, or kind of like apathy towards struggles with mental illness or something along those lines. It was a little bit weird to kind of, if that is what they're going for, to externalize like that in the end, because it's been very insular in like very just focused on the dynamic between Beau and Mona, and like just to kind of pull it out all of a sudden for the last like 5-10 minutes it seems a little bit odd, but I'm not entirely positive that was what it was going for, if there was some other element to that.
Yeah, this is like, because it does feel like, because trying to think of like the kind of things that it's like, it's kind of like the most obvious ones I could take where it's like, oh, this is like, you know, The View or things like that, you know, aren't quite super built on in the movie, at least from...
If it's supposed to be a metaphor for the audience, I'm fucking done. Like, that's so boring and lazy. Like, wow. The audience are the voyeur? No one's ever said that before. Hitchcock did make a whole fucking thing of that.
Have you ever considered about how an audience are people who watch things?
Have you ever thought that watching these terrible acts is an act of transgression you are committing?
Don't you know that depicting something in a movie and watching that movie is the same thing as doing the thing?
This is a group purging.
Yeah, it's like, it's like, I don't know if that's what I was going for. It could also just be like kind of a character thing of Beau like looking around, like trying to find like someone, some way out. But his whole world is kind of getting encompassed within his mother. Again, the pictures that form her face, you know, the way that everything has kind of been filtered through her personality, her ego.
Yeah, I think something along those lines would be the most satisfying, I suppose, because you're just, again, underlying the fact that there is nobody else for Beau, because she's done such a comprehensive job of shaping his existence. And then again, she can unshape that, as you said earlier.
Yeah. Poor Beau.
Yeah.
No.
Tough break.
I know. But yeah, that's... I feel like we could like really start like digging into other stuff. Like, did you have like any other like particular angles you want to take with the movie? Anything else you wanted to elaborate on?
I think I've hit a lot of kind of the big thoughts that I've had. It's, you know, I think it's refreshing to see him exploring these. Again, there's commonalities to his earlier films. You know, you see the same kind of intergenerational dynamics with, like, in Hereditary, the kind of matriarch figure who's, like, you know, breastfeeding Charlie and doing all that. Again, is kind of this, how does one person control, like, subordinates, essentially, within the family. We see that explored in a different way here. Tonally, you know, toxic relationships and how do people try to escape from them or fail to do so, you know, but we can't always just burn our boyfriends alive. So yeah, it's just like, I think that like he's showing that he's definitely someone who's got a specific kind of area of interest, but he is good at finding new like entry points into that and different things, different lights to look at that, or lenses to look at that through.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, where it's like, you know, it's like yes, he's making another movie about unhealthy relationships, but he's able to do it in ways that still feel fresh, that feel like he's still growing as an artist, which I'm just kind of happy to see. Like, he is, you know, keeps pushing. You know, this felt like he was pushing himself, and I always appreciate that. Yeah, like I'm just really yeah, I'm really glad that this turned out. It really lived up to the expectations that I had for it, which were very high. And yeah, Ari Aster, if you're listening to our little 17 subscriber podcast, good job.
You're doing good, kid.
We'll get we'll get David Lynch from The Fablemans to just be like, yeah, go for it.
We'll get him to tell them where to put the horizon.
All right. Well, do you want to go ahead and wrap it up here? Do you want to?
Yeah. Sorry, spaced out.
But yeah. So I think we kind of I think that's when people can tell that we would probably very highly recommend it. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Reynard. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you all out there for listening to us. We really appreciate it. We'll be back in another couple weeks. I think we are already planning for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Feel free to join us in a couple weeks for that. And good night, everybody.
Night.